Hey guys, so I wanted to come on here to talk a little bit about the prompt for our first essay in this class. So I'm making this video on Tuesday, September 15th. The prompt went up yesterday, Monday the 14th. All the due dates are on here, so please follow along with this as you're watching this video. You'll also hear more about it in our announcement on Sunday, but the rough draft is due Monday, I believe it's the 21st. And then the final draft is due the following Monday, the 28th. This is hopefully an exciting opportunity. We write 4 essays in this class, and they are pretty identical to the kinds of essays that you're going to be expected to write in expository writing next semester. We use the same exact grading criteria in this class that we do in that class. So the idea, if all goes according to plan, is that by the end of this semester, you will be more than prepared to write the kinds of essays that your professor is going to be looking for next semester when you're in expository writing. You're not expected to write this perfectly on the first try. There is some wiggle room built into the grading system. So we'll go over grading criteria probably in a different video or in a different resource. For now, let's just look at the prompt. So you're using our first 2 texts in this paper. So Maria Konnikova's The Limits of Friendship and Jon Ronson's How the Online Hate Mob Set Its Sights on Me. All 4 of our essays in this class will be synthesizing 2 texts in that way. So each unit will do 2 new texts and you'll have a new paper prompt. But the structure of these essays, the expectations, like I said, the grading criteria is all going to be the same. So it's nice in the sense that you get to kind of practice the same style of writing over and over and over again until you get it just right. A few more kind of submission details. It's in MLA format. Everything is in MLA format. Formatting is not the most exciting or important thing in the world, but it can become important, especially when we get into like length requirements, because as you'll see, the rough draft has to be at least 3 full pages. That means to the last line, very bottom of the 3rd page at minimum. And the final draft has to be at least 4 full pages, again, to the last line of the 4th page at minimum. So formatting does become important if, say, your spacing is set too large, or your font is too large, or your margins are too large. And then when I go to fix that, suddenly you're only at 2.5 pages or something. If a paper ever is significantly under the minimum length requirement, I would bounce it right back to you, say this isn't accepted, and you would have to finish it and resubmit for a late grade. Essays in this class do get penalized just like everything else if they're submitted late. So a late rough draft would result in half a letter grade off the paper, and a late final draft would result in a full letter grade off the paper. Again, we'll go more into that when we talk about grading criteria a bit more, but these papers are tricky enough as it is. You don't want to lose any additional credit for lateness or for formatting issues or length or silly things like that. Okay, so as I said, you're using our first 2 texts, Konnikova and Ronson. The idea is to pull in direct evidence. So that means quotes, word for word quotes, key terms, concepts from these 2 articles, and only from these 2 articles. So ideally, you shouldn't be seeking outside sources. You shouldn't be quoting other evidence outside of these 2 texts. The goal of this class, and again of Expos next semester, is to see what you can do by close reading and working with the language just in the text that you're given. So please try to avoid using anything from outside of these 2 texts. If you absolutely have to bring something else in, I discourage it. But in that case, just make sure you cite all of it properly so that there's no questions of plagiarism or anything like that. Okay, so in these papers, and when you look at this prompt, you'll see that I always give a kind of blurb where I'm pulling in some language and concepts, pointing out some overlap between the texts, and then I'll pose a question in bold. I'm going to read through this little prompt section just so you could see how I incorporate the language of these texts into like an explanatory paragraph. I think it's a good model for the ways that you can pull in and weave some of the language into your own writing. Okay, so in the article, The Limits of Friendship, author Maria Konnikova expresses the concern that some social skills may not develop as effectively when so many interactions exist online. She quotes psychologist Robin Dunbar, who explains that in the sandpit of life, when somebody kicks sand in your face, you can't get out of the sandpit. You have to deal with it, learn, compromise, he said. On the internet, you can pull the plug and walk away. There's no forcing mechanism that makes us have to learn. For Konnikova, this concern is presented as a predicted consequence of increased online interaction. But another author, Jon Ronson, goes beyond mere predictions. In his article, How the Online Hate Mob Set Its Sights on Me, Ronson looks at actual examples of the ways in which users interact online after having metaphorical sand kicked in their faces. Ronson argues that engaging in online conflicts in this way is leading us to lose our capacity for empathy and for distinguishing between serious and unserious transgressions, and notes how we are constantly lurching towards instant cold judgment of one another. Now here's kind of the prompt proper. In this essay, I want you to use ideas from Konnikova to help explain the examples in Ronson. How might the online hate mobs, described by Ronson, be a result of the underdeveloped social skills discussed by Konnikova? Okay, I know that was quite a bit of content, quite a bit of language to parse through. Again, I hope you heard how I was pulling in. I was trying to air quote so you could follow along. The moments where I was pulling exact terminology, exact phrases from these authors, but using it in the context of my own explanations. That's the kind of move that I'm hoping to see in your papers as well. So to kind of translate that long, wordy spiel that I just went through, basically, the connection that I'm pointing out to you is both of these authors are talking about interactions online, right? That's kind of a basic similarity that they have. Konnikova is saying, she's making a prediction, right? Here's why I think our social skills and our relationships are going to start deteriorating. I don't know if this is going to happen, but this is what I'm concerned might happen. So she's making a prediction and giving us those reasons why it might come to be. And Ronson is showing us how things actually are online, right? So in a way, you could think of this as like Konnikova made a prediction and Ronson is showing how that prediction is playing out or not. So what I'm asking you to do in this paper is to look at examples from Ronson and see how Konnikova might explain them, right? Konnikova says, here is how our social skills are going to be affected. In this example from Ronson, do we see that playing out? Do we see these people's social skills being affected in that way? Is there a way that you can argue that these disagreements in Ronson are happening because of some underlying cause that Konnikova was predicting? The reason I'm writing the prompt in this way is to get you thinking past just a simple compare contrast. So what we wouldn't want to see in these papers is just like, here's Ronson talking about the internet. Konnikova also talks about the internet. Here's Ronson talking about people disagreeing. Konnikova's also worried people might disagree. A simple compare contrast like that, it's going to be really difficult to make it anything other than a summary, right? And when we talk more about the grading criteria, we'll get more into the fact that summarizing too much is one of the biggest issues, obstacles that students have to overcome in this class and in expository writing. Our goal for you in this program, in this writing program, and hopefully your goal for yourself is to contribute something to the conversation, to help your reader see something from these texts that wouldn't have been obvious to them if they just skimmed it on their own. Some of this probably sounds familiar to you from the close reading video. The reason we ask you to read closely to kind of push past this surface literal reading is so that you can eventually get into some analysis and show us something about these texts past a simple summary level, compare contrast level. So this is the overlapping concept that I've picked up on and pointed out to you. This is kind of the synthetic relationship that I'm pointing you towards. But feel free to interpret this loosely and openly. And by that, I mean, this is a prompt meant to prompt your thinking. It's kind of like your jumping off point. It's your stepping stone, but it's not meant to be a limitation on what you're allowed to talk about or write about in this paper. I don't want to read 20 identical papers from everyone in this class. Ideally, you guys will use this to kind of think back at different moments that it activates in your memory, look at bits of evidence, perform some analysis. And then if that starts taking you in a different direction, if you have some other idea in the process, I hope that you'll feel free to pursue that. Again, I keep referring to the grading criteria. I didn't want to cover them in the same video because I think it would get too lengthy. But ultimately, you're graded on, are you making an original argument? Are you close reading evidence to develop that argument? You're not graded on how literally are you answering the prompt, right? So again, I don't want you to feel like married to this prompt. I don't want you to feel limited by it. Use it as a way to get the wheels turning, to get your juices flowing, and then be on with it, right? Go ahead and pursue whatever analysis, whatever argument you see unfolding. Okay, on every prompt, there's also going to be this section called questions to get you started. And there's a note that these aren't meant to be used as a checklist. So it's not like answer question 1 in paragraph 1, answer question 2 in paragraph 2. Again, they're just brainstorming questions. It's for this early part of the process, before you've started gathering evidence, before you have any idea what your argument is going to be. These are questions to just get you thinking, right? So I ask, for Konnikova and Dunbar, what are the benefits of in-person interaction that are lost in online interactions? And what negative consequences might this produce in online interactions? For Ronson, what positive characteristics does he notice in in-person interactions? And what negative characteristics does he notice in online interactions? Does Ronson give his own explanation for why these negative characteristics are emerging? If so, how does it compare to the one provided by Konnikova and Dunbar? And if the online shaming situations from Ronson were to instead happen in person, how might they play out differently? So I'm asking you to think about how do we communicate in person versus how do we communicate online? What are the benefits of each and the drawbacks of each? And when negative consequences arise, why are they arising, right? Where are those issues coming from? Again, Konnikova gives us some explanations. Ronson probably gives some explanations of his own as well. This is the overlap, again, that I'm noticing, that I'm pointing out to you. Use these when it comes time to sit down and start brainstorming, start pre-writing for this essay. I would say your first step should be go find some evidence. When you read through this prompt, what moments does it make you think of, right? When are these authors talking about in-person versus online communication? When are these authors talking about the positive consequences versus the negative consequences? When are they giving explanations for where this is coming from, why it's arising? Start in the evidence. Don't start by worrying about a thesis just yet. Your final draft should have a thesis, should have an argument, but our concern, our interest, and our focus, especially in these first few units, is going to be close reading evidence. That is the heart of this class. That is the heart of these papers. Find some moments from these two authors that you can connect in some way, that you see as being related, and see what you can say about them, right? Not just a summary of them, not just telling me, here's what this says, but an analysis, an argument about them. by noticing this overlap, here's what now I can say. Here's how I can extend the author's point. Here's how I can push this conversation forward and teach you something that wasn't so obvious before. So I know this still leaves a lot of questions, I'm sure, as far as structure, as far as grading goes. I promise you we will cover all of that either in another video or at the very least in class materials. And like I said, as always, please, please, please reach out to me with questions. Reach out to me with any issues. If you want to bounce ideas off of me, I am happy to work with you on all of this. So good luck, happy writing, and I'm excited to see what you guys produce.